Hey guys, I recently did a live stream and tried to test whether ranged or necromancy is the better combat style in RuneScape right now. To do this, I completed a few boss kills at a number of different bosses using ranged and then testing a few kills with necromancy to get a feel of the pros and cons, but also to compare kill times. Before we take a look at the different boss kills, here's the gear that I was using. For ranged, I was using full Serenic armor with nearly best in slot perks. I had Crackling 4, Relentless 5, as well as Biting 4, Dragon Slayer. In my legs, I had Impatient 4 and Enhanced Devoted 4, and my Bow of the Last Guardian had Precise 6, Demon Slayer, and Crumbing 4, Ruthless 1. You can see for the weapon, I was using the Bow of the Last Guardian, which is the best ranged weapon in the game, currently costing around 3 billion coins. I also was using the Stalker's Ring and the EOF with a Dark Bow spec, but I also have a physical SGB for its spec. I also have the ranged Zuck Cape, and I am using the Fleeting Boots and Cinderbanes to complete my poison build with the Bic Arrows and Blood Reaver. My range gear is fairly close to being best in slot, but I am missing a few things. Elite Dracolith armor would definitely help improve my DPS slightly and provide a bit more adrenaline. And I'm also missing a few more EOF switches with things like the SGB in it and the Eldritch Crossbow. My perks are pretty good, but I am missing Eruptive 2 on my Crumbling perk. But overall, my range setup is a pretty high level, even though I am missing a few things. I do also have the tier 99 curse for ranged, which does help a lot too. I think comparing my range setup to my necromancy setup is fairly comparable. I almost have best in slot, but I'm missing a few items. You can see I'm using nearly full tier 95 gear, except for the robe top. Instead, I have the tier 90 top, and I'm also only using Biting 2 rather than Biting 4. Aside from this, my perks are best in slot with Precise 6 and Aftershock 4 Eruptive 2 on my weapons. On my armor, I have Crackling 4, Relentless 5, and Impatient 4, Devoted 4, as well as Invigorating and Undead Slayer. I also currently don't have the tier 99 Necromancy Curse, so that lends a small advantage for ranged, but I would say that overall for both styles, I nearly have best in slot, but I'm just missing a few items. Now, just for fun, I decided to compare the costs of my armor for ranged and necromancy. For my ranged setup, it cost me nearly 6.2 bill for all my current gear, including Grico and the tier 99 curse, based on current GE prices. If I was to complete my ranged setup, which would mean I would need Elite Dracolich, also 2 more EOFs and the ECB, it would cost me around another 3.3 bill, meaning completing a full best in slot range setup costs almost 10 bill right now. For necromancy, my gear costs about 2.4 bill, and all I'm missing is the tier 95 robe top and the tier 99 curse, which would cost around another 1 bill. So by my estimates, best in slot range costs about 9.5 bill, excluding perks, and best in slot necromancy is about 3.5 bill. Which is drastically lower. This just goes to show you how expensive it is to get best in slot ranged gear versus necromancy. Anyway, now that you know my gear setup, let's get to the boss kills. So I wanted to try a few bosses that I am most familiar with. I started with the Glacor. Now, one problem with the Glacor is that it does have randomized mechanics during the fight, so each attempt is a bit different and could provide a different kill time based on the mechanics faced, so this is something to keep in mind. I tried 3 kills in each style to see what my best kill time would be, and then I would switch to the next style. So I started by doing 100% Glacor. With Glacor and ranged, I could use the poison build, so I used Bic Arrows and the Blood Reaver along with my Cinderbanes to maximize the poison damage, and this build can be really overpowered. The theory is that it will do better at higher enrages since the boss fights are longer and the poison damage is just more advantageous. For my best range kill for 100%, I got a 1 minute and 48 second kill. Now, comparing this to my necromancy kill, I found that it was actually a lot faster. Now, do keep in mind, I am a little bit more familiar with necromancy since that is the combat style I have been using for the last while, so I am maybe a little bit rusty with ranged, but I was feeling pretty good with it. My kill time with necromancy was quite a bit lower. It was 1 minute and 24 seconds. So that is one win for necromancy so far, but now let's see how 500% enrage fares. The idea was that the range kill would be a bit better at higher percent enrages because I am getting more poison stacks and the poison damage is just continuing to be a bit more overpowering. With my 500% Arc Glacor kill, my kill time was 3 minutes and 17 seconds, which is a pretty good kill time, but maybe not so much when it compares to Necromancy. My Necromancy kill time was still superior. I got a 2 minute and 37 second 500% Arc Glacor kill, which is honestly fantastic. So I beat my range kill time by about 40 seconds, which is pretty significant. I did also try a few higher enraged kills around 680% when I was streaking, and I found that Necromancy and ranged, they had very similar kill times. In fact, my 680% kill time for range was about 3 minutes and 18 seconds, where my Necro kill time was 3 minutes and 16 seconds. I was consistently getting very similar kill times, so I do think the higher the enrage you get with ranged, the better it is. And again, it's because those big stacks and you just dealing so much poison damage. So if you are fighting a boss that does have a long boss fight and can be poisonable, then range could potentially have the upper hand. It's at least a lot closer to Necromancy than some shorter boss fights. But overall, Necro always is really good DPS. And against the Arc Glacor, I could really use the either one, but I do think Necro has the upper hand. Next, I went and tried Kerapac. I started with normal mode to see what the difference would be with ranged and with Necro. With ranged, Kerapac can be poisoned, so the big poison build still does work. I was able to get a pretty good kill time in 1 minute and 47 seconds with ranged, but when coming in with Necromancy on the very first attempt, I got a new PB. I got 1 minute and 39 seconds. So again, Necro did win on the Kerapac normal mode battle, but then I decided I would test it out on hard mode. Hard mode is a longer fight. Maybe the big arrows are then better and will deal more poison damage. Now, I first tried hard mode Kerapac with ranged, and I should say hard mode Kerapac is a bit outside of my comfort zone. I don't think I ever even got a solo hard mode Kerapac kill, so I was sort of just testing out to see whether or not it was easier with ranged or easier with Necromancy, see if I could get the kill with either style. And with ranged, you can see I did make it to the final phase, but I ran out of food and I ended up perishing to Kerapac in the very last part of the fight when he was down to 60,000 life points. If you look at the kill time, I'm about 6 minutes in, which is pretty good for hard mode Kerapac. So I do think the damage that I was doing with ranged was really, really good. And I think with a bit of practice, ranged could definitely be the best combat style here. Because as you can see with Necromancy, I am approaching the final part of the fight, and the kill time is already at the 6 minute mark. So with ranged, my DPS was actually much better at Kerapac, and I think the reason for that is during most of the fight, you have the 400% toxic stacks with the big arrows. So I am thinking the longer the fight is, the better ranged is. But you can also see with Necromancy and my ghost constantly healing me, I didn't really use much food during this fight. And in fact, I was even able to finish off the kill with Necromancy fairly easily with lots of food left. And again, I'm not really that big of an expert on hard mode Kerapac. So I would say that Necromancy is definitely a lot more accessible, a lot easier, better survivability, but ranged probably is better DPS at hard mode Kerapac, especially with that poison build. Next, I wanted to test out ranged at Elite Dungeon 1. I have been doing a lot of Elite Dungeon 1 with Necromancy lately, and I have gotten all my PBs with Necromancy, so I wanted to see how does ranged do here. It's a bit different because it is a full dungeon, and there's a lot of AoE abilities that you need to get through the dungeon fast, which Necromancy is fantastic with, but I specifically did look at the kill times for the individual bosses and also kept in mind the approximate time for the run. For the individual boss kills, Necromancy had the best kill time every single time. For the Sanctum Guardian, the kill time was almost half as long. Masuda was quite a bit quicker, and Siryu, I kind of struggled with range to get any kind of damage on the crystals. I actually did a 3 cycle, whereas with Necromancy, I have been quite close to getting a 1 cycle, but really have only actually completed a 2 cycle. So the kill times for the bosses were definitely much better with Necromancy, and I also found that the dungeon clears are just a lot better. Now do keep in mind I don't have all of the best ranged gear, and if I did have the Eldritch Crossbow spec, that would have definitely helped with Siriu. If I even had the Decimation spec in an EOF, that would have helped for the dungeon clear. But it really just goes to show that Necromancy's abilities, it really has everything. It has high damaging abilities, it can burst damage, but it also has a lot of AoE abilities with things like Threads of Fate and the Scythe ability. I may not have had all the gear required to really make this a fair comparison between ranged and Necromancy, but again, I think it just goes to show how accessible Necromancy is and how easy it is to get all the different unlocks for it, so it can be a top tier combat style. I was able to get awesome kill times with Necromancy, and it's just a lot easier to use. So in my opinion, with elite dungeons in general, I think Necromancy is king, mainly because it has really great AoE, it does have good survivability with the Ghost, and then it also has the burst damage needed for things like Sirius crystals. Finally, I just decided to test it out at Vindicta to see which combat style might have the best sheer DPS. Again, if I had the ECB and Split Soul, that would have definitely helped ranged here, but I found that ranged was extremely powerful. It actually shredded Vindicta. I got a sub 30-second kill when doing it back-to-back times. Whereas with Necromancy, I kind of did struggle actually to beat this. It took me 6 or 7 Vindicta kills to get a new PB with Necromancy, where I was really trying to min-max everything. But overall, both combat styles, their DPS is really strong. I think with ranged, it does maybe have the potential to have more DPS if you are really good with the combat style, know how to use the Bow of the Last Guardian optimally, and have that 10 billion coin best in slot set up. So if I was going to summarize the comparison between ranged and Necromancy, I would say that Necromancy is probably the best combat style for most players. It's a lot easier to obtain, a lot cheaper to get the best in slot gear, and it's just a lot easier to use. The rotations, they're really simple, and everything seems to make sense with it having certain stacks for different abilities. It has the utility with the incantations and everything. It also is the only combat style with invoke death, which means for all bosses, you basically get a free 30k hit at the end of the boss fight. I think it has the survivability, which sort of matches magic and crit plume armor, since it has the ghost and also darkness incantation. And then it also does have just really great damage and really good AoE, and it's just a lot easier to learn. So I do think Necromancy is what most people are going to stick with. In fact, I even did a poll to sort of figure out what players are deciding to use for their combat styles. And so far, Necromancy is a clear winner at 56% of players saying that they are using Necromancy. I do think that ranged will make sense for some players, especially some that want more actions per minute, and to maybe feel a little bit more rewarding, knowing which abilities to use and when. I saw it with the hard mode Kerapac fight, where my kill time would have been a lot better with ranged if I was able to complete the kill. So with some more experience and best in slot ranged gear, I do think ranged could potentially have higher damage, but it is just a lot more difficult to use. So again, for the average player, I would say Necromancy is the combat style to use. And while I might use ranged for certain bosses like Glacor and potentially learning hard mode Kerapac, I am probably going to be sticking with Necromancy for now, just because its simplicity and the fact that it still does deal top tier damage in RuneScape 3 right now. Let me know in the comments what your guys' thoughts and opinions are on Necromancy versus ranged, and if you are trying melee or magic, let me know your thoughts on that too. Those are also some really intriguing styles to use, and again, like I said in one of my previous videos, I do think combat is quite balanced right now. I think most people are going to continue to use Necromancy because it is an easier style to use and does deal some of the best damage in the game. But really, you can pick any style and master it, and you will deal really good damage and contend for some PBs at any boss in the game. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Peace.